think we go into every album feeling a bit nervous, actually. I always do, because you never presume it's going to work. You know, it's the way we work in the studio. We arrive and with no bits and sort of turn on the gear the first day and play. There's always little edge there, I think, a bit like, what if we sort of, nothing comes out?
I think we felt with Abacab, we sort of like, in many ways, you cleared out all the furniture, you know. And so with Genesis, it was a kind of a question of redecorating a little bit. And I think, we had some areas we hadn't been in before. We had our own studio at this point in time, which obviously we had for Abacab, but it was the first time we were able to actually record in the studio.
That album was the first time we actually did write and record and mix in that environment. The Abacab prior to that was written in the house while the barn was being, or the cowshed was being transformed into the studio.
Mama is a great example of this album. That sums up how the album worked. The version you probably heard of Mama that's there was recorded very early on. It was a slightly longer section, if I remember rightly. And so you captured spontaneity for the first time. Actually, you captured us kind of writing things and playing them very early on, and recording them rather than finishing the song and going in to record, somewhere else later.
We had various versions of it. We had the drum machine part, and then I'd sort of bass pedal and put all these sounds on top of it. And we had a sort of atmosphere going which we knew was going to be strong. We didn't know quite what the top line was going to be. It could have been a lot of things and still been good. So we sort of got a basis down very early and worked on it like that.
I suppose Mama is a song that most people, because it's drum machine based, everybody thinks it's my thing. But actually Mike was the one that came up with that early Linn drum machine sound with the going through the gated reverb.
Put it into a boogie amplifier and turned it up incredibly loud, so it just distorted, and got this great sound,
This poor little amplifier was just jumping over the ground like this, but it produced this fantastic sound. It made the drum machine sound really, really good.
And it was the early days of taking a MIDI cable out of the back of the drum machine, plugging it into a keyboard. So if you had a cowbell going da 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 da, and Tony put his hand on the keyboard, it would just play the rhythm, but it would play the notes, so dun 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 dun. And I was into sort of this sort of John Lennon Bebopalula Echo thing. I can't see. And Hugh Padgham had brought in this record that had just come out by Grandmaster Flash, which was The Message, which he put on. And this is kind of really, it's hard to believe now, but it's really early days of rap, so no one had really heard this stuff. And he put this like, it's like a jungle sometimes. It makes me wonder how I keep from going under. And we all thought that was great, let's laugh for such character. It's great. So we kept playing it. And we just happened to be going back into the studio after having listened to it to do Mama. And so we were just sort of improvising our way around it, and every now and again I go, and, the guys would laugh. And anyway, it became the thing. It became the kind of the hook of the song. And it's all because of Grandmaster Flash. And you ask most Genesis fans that, and that would be a million miles away. But that's how it happened.
That's always what I always call one of our little sort of Beatley chug songs, like sort of that Beatles sound they have. A sort of sweet little song, really.
Like Rocky Raccoon, I always think about, which was always a song I liked a lot by the Beatles, and great feel, really. I mean, I started playing that piano riff, and then Phil started doing this riff, and we knew we had a feel, quite know where it was going, and I just purposely kept all the chords very simple, and just sort of had you didn't want to kind of go miles in any direction. I wanted to kind of stay where it was because it felt really good.
But why does it always seem to be me looking at you with you looking at me? It's always the same, it's just a shame, that's all.
At the time, anyway, it was much more obviously radio friendly than Mama, which was a little bit of a dark horse for AM radio in America. I think at that point it was still AM, FM,
I was kind of surprised it turned out to be a big hit in America. I suppose quite a sort of catchy little phrase Phil had on the word "that's all," but I think it was just our time was right in America. I think round about that album where things just started working on the radio. You know, we've been playing the States for years and years, and suddenly songs, we got better at writing shorter songs.
Home by the Sea, where we were able to improvise. Phil had the riff, the dun chicka jung jung, that, which was the second part, and Mike and I just improvised on top of it, and we made up a couple of 30-minute tapes of us just improvising on top of it, and then went through it and just found the good bits and stuck them all together, and that's exactly what you've got on the piece, and I think it's one of my favourite of our instrumental pieces of all.
That album also was the beginning, the first time we used like electronic drums. You know, and Simmons was a new drum system that had come out, and it was like playing on Formica tops, you know, little octagonal Formica tops. They eventually started to make them feel a bit more like drum skins, you know, real drums, but it never really worked. And Home by the Sea, the that was all, you know, that I sat down and played that pattern on that sound with those presets, and you know, it had such a lot of atmosphere, and everyone started playing along. It was a bit like kind of comparable to Intruder with Peter's thing, where you just sort of get a sound and you play with it, and suddenly that's a musical part, you know, and everybody jams along with it.
By the sea, creeping up the blind side, shining up the wall, stealing through the dark of night.
When we were writing the song, Phil had this one phrase he kept singing, "Home by the Sea, Home by the Sea," and I thought, well, I know I was writing the lyrics to this thing. I thought, well, Home by the Sea, what does that conjure up? I thought, well, let's have a spooky Home by the Sea, you know, and the idea of a burglar going in there and actually getting enveloped and suddenly being all these ghosts surrounding him, everything just quite appealed to me. And also some of the melodic, some of the little keyboard things that were happening sort of felt a bit ghosty, and I thought that was quite a nice thing to do. And then the idea really, which the song is of the idea that we're telling our life story through our songs, which is sort of represented by the third verse of the song, as we relive our lives in what we tell you, which I think is quite a sort of strong thing, and it's sort of what you do in a group, I think.
As we relive our lives in what we tell you, beyond the silver rainbow.
Side one, as it were, the old side one, it's kind of got the three best known songs on it. Mama, That's All, and Home by the Sea. And the second side is slightly more quirky songs on it. It's a slightly forgotten side, I think, in many ways, of Genesis. And I think it contains a couple of, of classic songs. One of them, Silver Rainbow, which I think is a real favourite of mine. You know, it was Phil started playing this kind of sort of like Adam and the Ants kind of drum thing, you know, with the Simmons and just banging his way through it, and started playing this piano riff on top of it. And I just thought it was a really strong song, and I hoped it would go a little further than it did, actually, but it wasn't sort of recognised.
I would put Genesis as one of my favourite albums, I think. It's a nice balance of long songs, short songs. And I think probably the most important thing about this album, actually, that's the point. I think one of the main things about this album is the first time we actually went in to record, having slightly changed our sound with Hugh Padgham, and going back and kind of doing this remixing with Mick Davis has been doing it. You come to the Hugh Padgham albums and they sound bloody good.
I think on this album, and that's quite a good representation on this, was one thing that had occurred in sort of keyboard land between Abacab and this album was the introduction of the sampling synthesizer. And some of the sounds, on the album, I mean, things like the koto that's used in the middle of Mama and various other little bits and pieces. But what I used to like to do was, which obviously is done a lot nowadays, was sample like little bits of music and then see what you could do with it. And an example of that is on the introduction to It's Gonna Get Better, where I just recorded the beginning of this classical album. It just was four cello notes. And I'd originally recorded it to try and get a good string sample, when I pressed it, it sounded awful. But then for some reason, I pressed four notes at the same time, and this incredible interweaving harmonies all suddenly came up. I thought, this is brilliant, fantastic. I'm doing nothing, and it's sounding wonderful. And so that sort of, made me think, and I just became quite a big feature within Genesis from then on, really, using those kind of ideas.
There's no other bands really that I've come across or heard about that do things, play, they write like that. Usually in a band there's one writer or a pair of writers, or there's two individual writers that submit material. But this is a lot like jazz. It's a lot like sitting down in a room with three guys and just playing, and eventually, it starts to sound good. And that's the moment you take the picture of, so that you know when you go back to it, that's where you start from. That's the magic of having a chemistry of people, and that's why, I never take that kind of thing lightly. The fact is that with the three of us can do that, and not many people do that. And there may be bits that are slightly suspect, and there are bits that aren't as good as others, but there's some great stuff in there that came out of nowhere, and that's what's good about the band.